would like to talk to you about homeschooling. I'm a homeschool advocate. I've been an educator for a very long time, roughly 45 years. I started when I was 16 years old, and I'm going to be 60 this year. When I was 16, I started teaching acting and writing workshops and in Los Angeles. When I was 17, I won an Emmy Award as a writer and a director, and that's why I was able to work at USC as an instructor, because they needed a professional writer to teach a professional writer's program. They didn't have a professional writer. I am not a professor. I've never been to college, not for a day, but I've spent 20,000 hours in the classroom as a teacher for LAUSD, for various universities in Southern California, and in private schools, and I've spent 30,000 hours authoring curriculum for homeschoolers. I am a homeschool advocate. I believe that everybody can and should homeschool, and I'm here to talk about specific ways to make the homeschooling experience more effective. And I wanted to share, before I forget, because it's in my pocket and I'm probably going to forget, yesterday we were walking downtown, we went for dinner, and we ran into the Lennon bus. Has anybody seen this? It is the most amazing thing. You want to talk about a fantastic facility for private schools or for homeschoolers. The Lennon bus, it's this great big bus paid for by various institutions. They go to places they're asked to go to where there are about 6 to 8 students. 6 to 8, that's it. So if you have a homeschool group, this is something you can do, and we asked them about it, and they said you can. The Lennon bus is this great big bus with professionals in it, a professional recording bay, professional video recording equipment, editing equipment, all kinds of stuff. And they bring kids in, and they're with them for a day, and the professionals work with them. The kids write a song, the kids record the song. It's professionally edited. They go out and they do a video with the song, and they mount it on YouTube, and it costs nothing. Nothing. So if you have a private school and you have 6 to 8 students, 10 students, he said his optimum number was 8, but if you're looking for an experience for these kids in the area of music, this is very, very cool. The email address is Lennon, like John Lennon, because it's Yoko Ono started the bus, and then a lot of institutions have now contributed. LENNONBUS, LennonBus.org. That's it. And they would love it if you have a private school or you have a homeschool group, if you wrote them and said, please come and let us share the experience, let us have this experience. That's all they want, is to share this facility. Years ago, I was lecturing on homeschooling in another place kind of like this, and a speaker got up from NASA, and this made me so sad when he said this. He said, we have people on the payroll, and we beg schools to invite us to come and speak for free to their population, to their kids. We beg them, and nobody will take us up on it. So, in my experience as an educator, I taught in private schools for 10 years, then I started homeschooling my children. In my experience as a homeschooler, I found that there are an incredible number of wonderful resources available via the internet that you can find very quickly if you just run a search, that are a tremendous adjunct to whatever curriculum or whatever methodology you're using. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about homeschooling and how it's different from any form of schooling. Schooling, by definition, is generally fairly structured, of course, and I'm not suggesting that homeschooling should not be structured. I don't believe that homeschooling should not be structured. I'm not an unschooler. I admire people who do that. I think it's an art, and if you're good at it, then you're going to have a genius on your hands, and that's wonderful. But I don't think there are a lot of people who are actually very good at unschooling, and I think that their kids miss a lot of education by unschooling. I think if you wait for life to hit you in the face and teach you a lesson, that's not enough. It needs to be more structured than that. I also believe that schools do not understand structuring for education in the slightest. Public schools are a disaster. The fact that the gentleman earlier today who spoke, Dale, fantastic. That guy's fantastic. He's from Detroit. He's dealing with personal security issues in Detroit for kids and adults in schools. 50% dropout rate in Detroit from the public schools. And that's the publicly announced dropout rate in Detroit. It's not the dropout rate because they don't tell you how many people dropped out before 11th grade. The actual dropout rate in Detroit is probably higher than 60%. That's a school district, like most large city school districts, that has utterly failed its community, its students, utterly failed. The educational process used by public schools uses a lot of tools. Those tools don't work. They have proven to be miserable failures now for decades. The literacy rate of our culture is declining. Functional literacy, which is the ability to read something and pull information out of it, is in serious decline. All kinds of statistics tell us that public education is a failure above and beyond the dropout rate, which is astronomical and which they're not honest about. So when I started homeschooling, I started looking at what doesn't work, because I'm a homeschooler and I'm not obligated, and this is one way you focus the homeschooling experience, I'm not obligated to use anything that public schools use. I'm not obligated to test my kids. I'm not obligated to keep grades. I'm not obligated to do anything but keep attendance, and the only reason I have to do that is because the state requires it. I have to be able to prove that my kid is doing school in case they ask. I have to be able to show them some of my kids' work in case they ask, but that's it. That's where the obligation ends. I don't have to do grades. I don't have to do student evaluations. I don't have to do the 3 R's. I don't have to do anything that standard education uses unless it will benefit my children. And that's where the focusing of homeschooling begins. Homeschooling, like all education should be, is not for the parents, it's not for the culture, it's not for the school, it's not for anybody but the student. It is the student's education, it is his life that's at stake. What he learns during those years is what he's going to take into his professional life and his adult life and make a life out of it. It's for your child. It isn't for you, it isn't for the school district, it isn't for anybody. So, you are your child's first line of defense, mom and dad. You know your child better than anybody. A teacher in a public school looks out at a classroom, and I've done this, I taught for LAUSD for a year, and you see 40 children, and I promise you, you don't know the names of most of those kids. You're a teacher in a public school. You can't point at Johnny in the corner and know that his name is Johnny. You have a little chart at your desk, and that's why you know his name. So if I don't know a kid's name, how can I know what he wants to do with his life? How can I understand what his strengths and weaknesses are as a student, as a human being? How can I know how to help him if I don't even know his name? How can I effectively evaluate him, quote unquote? Teacher evaluations, student evaluations, all a part of public education. How can I do those things? Well, you can't. You can do them, but you will do them badly and fail the child. You might serve the system, but you're not serving the kid. Okay? So you're homeschooling. I'm going to assume that this is a room full of people who are looking for alternative forms of education. Homeschooling, I want to tell you right now, is not alternative education. It never was, it never will be. Schools, teachers have tried to sell that message that homeschool is alternative education. Private schools, alternative education. What this gentleman is doing, that's alternative education. No, it's not. This is education. And if you look at the history of education, public education has basically only existed for about since 1862 in the United States, and it was enforced at gunpoint or nobody would have allowed their kids to go. They were met at the door in Massachusetts when they started public education by people with guns saying, "You're not taking my kid." It's too bad they didn't keep their guns out. Public education has failed our entire culture, and the marks of it are everywhere. So you're homeschooling, and you have a choice. You can use tests. You can schedule your homeschooler just like a school schedules education. You can schedule those 6-hour days to start at 9 o'clock and end at 3 o'clock and give them a half hour. You can do all the things that schools do. You can do that. Should you do that? No. Why should you not do that? Well, let's take it apart bit by bit and look at how you can focus the homeschool experience and why you should. Who is it for? It's for your student. Great. So you look at your 10-year-old son and you say, Johnny, how can I help you? What can I give you that will let you experience yourself, experience life, experience the world in a way that will put you in charge of everything that's going to happen to you from this day forward? Make you the boss of your own life. What can I give you that will do that? And testing, let's start with that tool, is not one of those things. What does a test do? Well, your son goes to school, he does a math test, and he gets 40% of it wrong. And he's given a D. And what do you now know? That the school didn't teach him 40% of the materials. The school failed. They get the D. Your son is there. He's there to learn. He would rather get something done with the time than sit in a classroom for 6 hours and do nothing and have it be meaningless to him or degrading for him because he's being told to do things that are useless to him. He hasn't been allowed to evaluate them. He doesn't understand the value of them. They have no value for him accordingly. Why would he care about that math test? Of course he doesn't do well in that math. And the kids who do well in schools do well because they are fantastically good at memorization and spitting out facts that they've read and spitting out information as required. But that doesn't mean they ever evaluated the information. It doesn't mean they ever made it theirs. What they did was what they were told to do. It's what this gentleman was talking about. This is what we want to see end. So your child that you're homeschooling, you want to empower him, not degrade him. It's easy to degrade a child. Keep telling him he has to learn stuff he's not interested in. Tell him how to learn it. Then test him on it and make him repeat the stuff he doesn't care about. You'll degrade him. It's easy. You can take the interest in education right out of a child but quick. But you're homeschooling. Why would you do that? Why? You're perfectly free to throw that out. So let's start with schedules. 9 to 3. But my kid doesn't like getting up till 11. And my kid does his best thinking from 3 in the afternoon till 8 at night. That's when he's most awake. That's when he's most aggressively interested in life and in the world and in his own education. Well, then why wouldn't you teach him then? It's for him. It's not for you. It's not for the local school that he's not even attending. Why maintain the schedule that the school demands? Schools have to have schedules because it's a group form of education, if you can call it education. Especially in public education. There are a lot of private schools who throw all this stuff out, and they're great. But the more of this you get rid of, it's chaff. Throw it in the fire and get to what your child really needs to be effective in life, to feel great about what he knows, to know a lot. Get to these things and throw the rest of it out. Schedule your homeschool for your child. Now, let's say you have 2 working parents, or you're a single parent. I was a single parent, and I homeschooled both my kids. I did that for years. How do you do that? Well, if you have a job and you can't be home, first of all, you can't, in the state of California, legally leave your children alone at home. There are all kinds of laws that child services love to use to take kids away from parents who do that. But let's say that we're not interested in child services, and we shouldn't be, and we're interested in the well-being of our child, and we have to have a job, and we have to make money. Good. So you're gone until 4 o'clock. Then school's going to start at 5. Now, what does little Johnny do until 5 o'clock? Well, his education is for him. So what does little Johnny want to do until 5 o'clock? What is he interested in? See, I think, setting the scheduling thing aside now, and I think, the idea with scheduling is schedule for your child and for your family. Schedule for his best hours when he's alive and well and awake and ready to learn, and schedule for you so you can be there as needed, of course. But don't schedule the way the school schedules. Who cares how schools schedule? You're not in school. I had some homeschoolers tell me they schedule like schools do because Johnny's friends go to school and they want to see him after school. Okay, form a homeschool group. That's what I did. I had 10 kids in my house every day, 4 years, with 2 other parents helping them through whatever they were studying while I was in the other room writing curriculum and coming out and improving upon it. Then Johnny's friends are there when Johnny's doing school, and they're a part of his school. It handles the quote-unquote socialization myth, and it solves numerous problems about Johnny seeing his friends. You want to do that? That's a way to do that, a way. So, setting scheduling aside, now let's look at testing. Testing is a great big tool for public schools. They love tests. They accumulate all these numbers from all this massive amount of testing they do, and from that they can evaluate how well they're doing. And that's why we test kids, supposedly. That's what I've been told by school districts and teachers. We test to see how the kid is progressing, but that's not what tests do. All a test tells us is what the school failed to teach. That's it. Johnny missed 40% of the math test. Oh, the teacher didn't teach that 40% of the materials very well because Johnny doesn't know it, and Johnny was in the classroom waiting to learn it. The teacher even enforced homework, which is another thing about homeschooling and focusing homeschooling. No homework, but we'll talk about that. No homework. School starts and ends when it starts and ends, and then the child is free to pursue his own interests. But we do these tests, schools say, to find out how your kid is progressing. And we have to know if your kid is remedial. Is he behind some mythical, fictional, average student that never, ever existed at a point in his studies he's supposed to be at by this age because somebody arbitrarily decided that's where he should be? You're a homeschooler, throw it out. It's nonsense. Testing is useless if that's what you're using it for. Testing can serve a purpose, and I'll tell you exactly what it can do, but you have to structure it to do this. Testing is great if it tells me, the parent, that my kid actually did study the material, because look, there's all kinds of answers on the page here. So he knew something about that history or that science or that creative writing or that whatever. We don't do tests in arts courses, by the way, because the art is the test. You create art, and you created art. But what we do use the test for is to figure out what he didn't study or what he didn't understand, where we failed him. Okay, I'm a homeschool dad. Oh, my kid missed these questions on this history test. Yeah, I didn't make this clear enough in the course, or the course failed him, or something happened here because he doesn't know the answers to these questions. And what tests should do is help me return him to that part of the studies as needed so he can really learn that material as needed. I don't need him to spit it out verbatim. I don't need him to memorize it. What I do need him to do with any information that he learns as a student is understand it. And then evaluate it. See, you want a child, when he's homeschooled, to do exactly what he's not allowed to do in school. In school, you are told, this is a fact, this is a science fact, this is a history fact, this is a fact. Learn it, memorize it, spit it out in the test. What you're never allowed to do is think about it. Look at it, decide if it's true. Is it true for you? This is a fact. Nothing's a fact until it's evaluated. That's how science works. Not a fact till it's been evaluated. Not. And who's doing the evaluating? Not mom, not dad, not the teacher, not the course, not the school, the student. You want him to have that information. Okay, then he has to be allowed to evaluate it. He has to look at that piece of information and say to himself, that's interesting, what could I do with it? I could do this, I could do that, it means this to me, it means that to me. Oh, this could be important to my life. And then that piece of information is his. He owns it. It's his. He just decided it's useful. It has value to him. And do you know what else you know once he's decided that it's useful and has value to him? He understood it. And hence the purpose of the test goes bye-bye. Because the real test is life. If a child understands information and can use it and sees value in it and wants to use it, he learned. We don't need numbers, we don't need grades. What are report cards used for? Here's another tool. You know, as a homeschooler, you're going to be asked to have transcripts. If you want your child to go to college, if you ever decide to put your kid back into a public school, and you should not do that, don't do that. But say, you know, your kid is a holy terror and he's eating the walls, chewing on the dog, and you really can't keep him at home and you want to return him to school, they'll ask for transcripts. What have you done with your child for the last 2 years? We need the transcripts. Okay. What did the transcripts show? That he attended school, that he studied certain subjects. That's all. That's all they ever show. That's all they're supposed to show. And what schools like, because it's how they think, is grades. Well, what does a grade really tell us? Grades are a very interesting phenomenon. They're a control mechanism. I'm a school. You send me your kid. Send me your kid. What's your kid's name? Seth. All right, send me Seth as a student. I'm a school. I'm going to give Seth a C in math. Now, what am I telling you? I'm telling you, your son, Seth, not very good in math. He's just average. He needs to do better. Oh, and listen, I want to tell you something else. Your son, Seth, I'm going to give him a lot of homework, and I hope you know math, because you're at home with him, and man, you're going to have to help Seth with his math. But don't worry, because it'll only take 2 hours a night. You didn't have a life, did you? You wanted a family? You wanted a family dynamic? No, you got homework, man. Now your family life is over. Okay, so let's take a look at this for real. All right, what are grades? Grades are a punishment. They're punitive. They're the way the school deflects attention from themselves to you, Dad. Hey, your kid isn't doing very well in math, Dad. A C. Well, but the school is supposed to teach him. You sent him, right? You sent Seth to school. He showed up. He was in the class. He was in math. He had his math book. He's doing work. He only got a C. Oh. Well, who really failed? Who got the C? Who was average there? Well, not your son, because he showed up, and poor you, because you had homework with him. Yeah, and by the way, that C, that's your C, too. You got to do better. Man, don't do that. All right, grades, report cards. What's the value? Well, the value is that it protects the school. You don't look too closely at the school when they're attacking your kid. You just try and protect your kid and help him. But the school failed your kid. He gets a fail in math, a flunk. Well, the school failed him. They didn't teach him. He couldn't do any of the math. You paid the school to teach him. Public education is expensive, $600 billion every year in the United States, 3 million teachers on the payroll. It's expensive, and your son only got a C, Seth only got a C. All that money, man, you got to help him. Do you see? Throw it out. Report cards. It's punitive. It's a way to get you to not think about how the school failed your child, because the school failed your child. He didn't fail math. They failed him. It's their job to teach. They get paid for it. And they didn't do it. They flunked. They failed. They blew it. They didn't give your son what he needed. But they don't want you to know that, because if you looked at all the millions, 77 million kids in public education as of 2005, I'm sure it's more now, 77 million kids. How many of those kids didn't get A's in every subject? Oh, almost every one of them. That means the school system failed every one of those kids. So what would an A really be? What would it look like in education, an A? What would it be if we didn't care about report cards and we weren't trying to protect schools and we weren't attacking families and trying to control them and making school the all-important constant in their life? Because your kid goes to school for 6 hours, but man, Seth's going to need 2 hours of homework a night. So now the entire family is involved in his schooling, and schooling is the most important thing in your life. How do we really evaluate an A? Well, what is an A? An A should really only mean that the student really learned something. He got it. He figured it out. It's his now. The information in that subject is understood. He understands the value of it. He evaluated it. He can use it, and he wants to use it if he feels it's something he cares about. And he may not. Okay. So, make sure when you homeschool that your kid learns everything he wants to learn. And then give him report cards with straight A's. And you'll have your transcript when the college comes knocking on your door and you want to send your kid to college, which you should not do either unless he's going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer or something that he absolutely must go to college for. But that's another story. All right, we're focusing the homeschool experience. No grades, no report. We're getting rid of stuff. No grades, no report cards, no evaluations. What do we do? What do we do with our time with this child? Well, what's the most important thing about a child's education? If you want him to want an education, if you want your student to love education, then you had better let him work on things he loves and is interested in. And the focus of homeschooling and the focus of education should always be the student's interests. Now, we have standardized requirements all through the United States. We have Common Core, and we have subjects that are required in school. You must do history, math, and science. When George W. Bush was president, he put a big emphasis on math and science, and at that time I was doing a lot of teaching, and I knew a lot of kids who hated math and science, but were really good actors, or really good writers, or really good artists, or really good at almost anything but math and science. What are you going to do? Force them to do subjects that they absolutely despise? Or let them get on with their lives and learn about the things that interest them so they will love education, love to learn, love what they're learning, care about it, commit to it, and rock and roll, get on with life. National standards, all standards, they're a mess because they have nothing to do with Seth. Nothing. They don't know your kid. Some guy in Washington came up with Common Core, a whole bunch of teachers, and they sat down and came up with Common Core. And what Common Core, which is what public schools use now as their standardized, this is what has to be done every year. What they do is they say, in the 4th grade, these particulars need to be covered in history, and these particulars need to be covered in science. If we all do this, then everybody will learn the same thing, and we'll have a common core in education. Well, here's the enormous problem with this, so many enormous problems with it, but here's problem number 1, public enemy number 1 in education. They don't know Seth. They don't know your kid. They don't know what he should learn in 4th grade. They don't know what he's capable of. He could be shooting for the moon, and they're tying his feet to a rock. He has to learn this and that. Yeah, but I'm already building an engine, a rocket engine. I'm designing a play for Broadway. No, I'm sorry, kid. Common Core. Common Core. And boy, let's underline common, because it's pretty common. Look, folks, your homeschoolers or your alternative, quote-unquote, alternative educators, all this stuff can go. Throw it out. The focus is your child. You don't need tests. You don't need report cards. You don't need to worry about national standards. And the moment you start homeschooling, national standards become a joke and you throw them out anyway because schools have to use them, but you do not. Most teachers I've talked to, and I talk to teachers frequently, they hate Common Core. They hate national standards. They don't want to do that stuff. They know it doesn't work. They know they're degrading children with it. They know they're not teaching anything worthwhile. But see, if you're a teacher with a classroom of 40 kids, it's very hard to focus on one and find out what he needs and wants and give it to him. That's very hard. A homeschooler has mom or dad in front of him. And mom and dad know him. And mom and dad are looking for one thing to focus the homeschool experience, the most important thing in education. The child's eyes lighting up. It is the most important moment in education. And it doesn't happen with a group because education happens one at a time. It happens to one child at a time in a particular moment regarding a particular subject that he's looking at, and he suddenly goes, wow, I like this subject, this activity, this, put a big circle around it, this is what I want to do. And your job as an educator and your job as a parent just got a lot easier because you now know what your kid wants. And your job then is to focus his education on what he wants. Create experiences and opportunities. Find ways for him to be exposed to that area that he already has told you he loves and wants to learn. And suddenly his education for him will be precious, beyond words, because he'll be learning and doing the thing he wants to do. And here's a funny thing about that. 6 months up the road, he won't be interested in that thing anymore. It happens. My daughter came to me and said, I want to play guitar. I really want to play guitar. She liked this guitar teacher. He was cute. So I bought her a guitar, and she had lessons for a few months, and then she found out that, and she was very interested, and she really rehearsed, practice. And she found out that he had a girlfriend, and guitar suddenly was not her thing. Right? Your student will be interested in whatever they're interested in for as long as they're interested in it. Create a lot of wonderful opportunities for them. They may stay interested in it, and that's their trajectory into life. But if they lose interest in it, you're back to base one. Provide a lot of experience and exposure to a lot of subjects. Let them have fun with it. Let them really digest information and evaluate it for themselves. Don't evaluate for them. Don't grade them. Don't punish them. Don't watch the clock. Education is not a race. Don't worry if one kid is slower than another. Who cares? It's not a race. This isn't Daytona. It's education. All right, so you're back to base one. My kid was interested in auto mechanics, and he doesn't want to do that anymore. He did it for a year, and he said, I realize my hands get dirty, and I don't like dirty hands. Okay, you're back to lots of experiences. And then 6 months later, his eyes lights up, and he says, acting. And you say, oi, no, not acting, which is what I said when my son said he wanted to be an actor, and he's now a professional actor. So there you go. Your job, find out what he loves, create many opportunities for it. Sure, get him basic math. Obviously, a kid has to be able to read. Illiteracy is on the rise, but homeschoolers learn how to read because they start reading stuff they care about, and they get better and better at reading all the time. All right, I'd love to take questions. If you have any questions, I'll give you this. I see one over here. Yes, sir.
All right, well, thank you for that. Loved your talk.
Thank you.
We're very new to the homeschooling world. We're actually going to be pulling our oldest out at the end of the year, all of our kids. Well, our oldest is the one who's he's in third grade. Okay. Two of them are not in school. The other one's in kindergarten and then in transitional kindergarten. Mm-hmm. But we decided at the end of the year, we're going to pull them out of school and homeschool them. And the catalyst for that is that my oldest is having some real challenges in school. Very bright, seems to ace at everything, but he's one of those kids that just can't sit in his seat. And what you were saying about the degrading of the kid really resonated. Two quick questions. One on the obligation. So I want to draw on your experience. You talked about the obligation of the parent is one, maintaining a schedule, and then just holding on to some of the work that the student is doing. So maybe if you can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Sure.
And then secondly, poke holes in this line of thinking or blow it out of the water or affirm it. Is there...
Okay.
What about putting in place for the kids in terms of the curriculum just some non-negotiables? Like you've got to know math, you've got to know English, you got to know how to read. Right. Everything else, totally your decision.
Well, so what was the first one? Give me the first one again.
The obligation.
Right. Those are legal obligations with the state, and the only reason that you care, is that you don't want legally to have any issues with the state where they come in and they Child Services has a talk with. You don't want that. Now, I don't know what the obligations as far as the state are today. There is a site called HSLDA, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. I know Ann doesn't like them, but they have a page with a map of the United States. Click on your state and a list of the legal requirements for homeschooling come up. That's the only thing I use HSLDA for, okay? So you'll know what your obligations are and you can look at it. But basically what I would tell you is is this: keep attendance. It doesn't matter what the hours are. Just, say, we did school on this day for 4 hours. Who cares what they were? And keep some samples of his work in each subject so that if for any reason you're ever required, and most states don't care, but if for any reason you're ever required to show work, you can show work. That's it. It's simple. There's hardly any obligation, and there are states like Texas that don't care what you do. So it just depends on where you live and what the legal obligations are created by the state. And what was the second question?
Second one is about non-negotiable. Like in the curriculum, math is a must, reading is a must. Everything else is about exactly whatever the kid wants to do. Speak into that or blow it out of the water.
I wouldn't blow it out of the water. I'm not that guy. I'm not a fan of unschooling, and I'm not a fan of just hoping that a kid learns. I'm not. I have a very designed curriculum that 20,000 homeschoolers use. I think that a kid has to learn basic math, and I don't teach math. I think a kid must learn how to read. I think that's absolutely necessary. But I think there are all kinds of ways to get there, and they're not all regimented, educative, schooling kind of things. I learned how to read by reading. My kids learned to read because I read to them every night, and I showed them the words that I was reading. And they learned through a process called whole word identification rather than phonics. They saw a word, they knew what the word was, and after seeing it 5 times, they knew, and they read brilliantly. My daughter's a writer, but I didn't teach them to read. We just read to them I read to them every night for an hour, my kids. So for years and years. I do think there are irreducible minimums in education. I don't agree with educators who say there are not, but I don't think there are very many, and I don't think that they're very hard. Basic math, any kid can learn it by the time he's 14 or 15. Algebra is for people who need algebra. Geometry is for people who need geometry. The rest of it is not, I didn't learn those subjects. I'm an Emmy Award-winning writer. They don't matter to me. So there are some irreducible minimums, but they'll happen naturally. Just allow your kid to receive an education. He will probably learn these things, especially reading. I wouldn't worry about it. Any other questions real quick? Ma'am, you said you had one, or?
If we have a quick question.
Just wanted to ask you to repeat, please repeat the website, or what do you recommend it to him to check the curriculum? Sorry.
My curriculum?
No, for the state.
Oh, HSLDA, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. Ann doesn't like them. She's shaking her head.
In California, go to hsc.org.
Yeah, you could do that. Right. As long as the requirements for California there, right? There are a number of sites you could go to.
HSC.org has fantastic information about how to legally homeschool in California.
Yeah, and all you need is
hsc.org.
And folks, all you need is the information. I don't care where you get it. HSLDA provides that particular information, but there are people who don't like them, and that's okay. So I don't love them. I don't hate them. I don't care. I just use them as a resource. Is that it, David? Okay.
Thank you. Stephen Horwich, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.